Welcome everyone. My name is Max Callahan. This is going to be the second presentation in our MotionBuilder series, and this presentation is going to cover working with motion capture data, applying that MoCap data to a 3D character, and then doing some brief editing of the motion capture performance. I'll probably switch between using the terms motion capture and MoCap throughout the presentation, but just so there's no confusion, those terms are interchangeable and they both mean the same thing. But before I get started here, I want to touch really briefly on what motion capture is and how the data we're going to be working with today was obtained. Some of you are probably, maybe even most of you are familiar with motion capture and what it is, but I've got a couple of videos here to just give you for those of you that might be unfamiliar with it, just a brief idea of what it is. This is probably the most common conception of what motion capture is. It's a performer wearing a skin-tight suit that has these white orbs attached to it, and then those orbs are recorded and are assigned to a 3D character that the motion capture artist can watch on the screen. This is what most people tend to think of when they think of motion capture. This is called an optical system, and the white orbs that you see are called sensors. This is a very expensive system, and you need a very large space in order to use it, because the data, the positions of those white orbs as they change, as the performer acts out the performance, are captured by a bunch of cameras, sometimes up to a dozen cameras. So you need a very large dedicated space in order to strategically place those cameras around that space to capture all of the positions of those sensors. The optical systems are extremely expensive, so generally they're used with projects that have relatively large budgets. But there are other types of motion capture systems. The performance that I'll be working with today was captured using a fiber optic system called the Shape Wrap. It's from a company called Measurand. This is just a very brief video, and hopefully you can see that the performers are wearing, it almost looks like electrical cords that are velcroed to the body, and the sensors are actually inside these electrical cord kind of things that are velcroed to the body, and there's no cameras for this system. It's just that those shape wrap cords with the sensors in it, those positions are recorded fiber optically from onto a computer. It can be done wirelessly. It is done wirelessly most of the time, so you don't need a very large space because there are no cameras. So as long as you have a large enough space for the performer to act out the performance that they want to achieve, that's really all that you need. So they're far less expensive and far less demanding of the project that's using it. The optical systems are far more accurate, but not the data that you get from fiber optic and other mechanical systems is still fairly accurate. So for most projects, they can get away with using something other than an optical system. Both of these systems, pretty much every system on the market, I have yet to hear of one or use one that hasn't been specifically written to work with MotionBuilder and work in real time. So the nice thing is that you can, when you're recording the motion capture session, the performer who's wearing the suit, because it can work with MotionBuilder in real time, if you have the 3D character modeled and rigged already, you can actually plug it in real time, so you can watch what the performance that the performer is going to act out, how it's going to look on the actual 3D character that you want to apply it to. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to open up here is what the data looks like when you first record it from the suit, from the performer wearing the suit, and what you get when you first bring that data into MotionBuilder. I'm going to play this for you, and this is the full screen it so you can see a little better. This is what we recorded in the session where I got this data, and you can kind of see it looks like a bunch of blue squares that are moving around, and these squares, as you probably guessed, line up with the sensors that were on the suit. The number of sensors and the locations of those sensors will vary greatly depending on which motion capture system you're working with. But the nice thing about it is that you, regardless of how many sensors there are and where they are on the figure, you can pretty much attach any motion capture performance to any 3D character. Again, I've yet to hear of one or work with one where that hasn't been the case. So, just to go back to the video for a moment, you can see that in every motion capture performance, and this is sort of industry standard, we ask the performer to strike what's called a T stance, usually at the beginning, always at the beginning, but often at the beginning and end of each performance. And a lot of times it's, it may be a long scene that ends up being used, but the actual motion capture is captured in very small chunks. So at the beginning and usually at the end of each of those performances, we ask the performer to strike this T stance, because that allows us to have a uniform stance that we can line up and match with any 3D character. Some of you may be familiar with the T stance if you've taken some character modeling courses or character rigging courses in the program. That most characters are, or at least a very large number of characters, are modeled in this T stance. And even if they aren't modeled in a true T stance, once the character is rigged, the skeleton can be posed to a T stance so that you can always have a uniform pose to match to the performer and to the 3D character. So we can see that, I think I discovered that the T stance in this performance is at 265, and that's pretty close to the T stance that I'm going to work with here. Now, I want to be able to assign this marker set, and that's what we call the collection of these markers. I want to be able to assign any marker set to any 3D character. So in order to do that, because the proportions of the 3D character may be wildly different than the performer, I need a conduit, or a way to be basically a go-between between the markers and the eventual 3D character. And in MotionBuilder, that's called an actor. It's a bit of an awkward name because a lot of people think of an actor as the person wearing the suit, but generally we refer to him or her as the performer, and the actor is what you'll see in a second in MotionBuilder. So I'm just going to go down here to my asset browser and in the characters folder, and I'm going to drag an actor into my scene. And you can see it looks sort of like a blue mannequin. And what we're going to do is we can pose the mannequin and change the proportions of it so that they line up pretty closely to the markers. And the nice thing about MotionBuilder is it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be lined up exactly with the markers. Close enough will do the job, and you'll see that even though I'm going to get somewhat close, see that it's not perfect, and yet later on you'll see that it really doesn't matter, that the markers will move the actor just as well as if it was perfectly lined up. So there's basically three ways that you would do this. You would first move the parts of the actor, and there's two ways to select it. You can either select it in the viewport, as I'm doing here, or in your character controls you can select the various parts of the actor. Either way, you're doing the same thing. You're selecting the various sections of the 3D actor. So I'd first start by moving the whole actor. And there's a little bit of a lag here now that I'm recording this session in MotionBuilder, so there may be some lag time, and you'll see when I move the mouse that there'll be a little bit of a delay, but nothing I can do about that. So I would move the character into at least close enough position here, close as I can get it. I can scale various parts of the actor to line up better. I can rotate. Okay, and I can scale. Two things at once in order to keep things uniform. So if I wanted to scale the arms, I'd scale them together. Now I have a fair amount of information to get through here, and I'd like to keep this as close to an hour as possible. So I'm going to open up, kind of like a TV chef, I'm going to open up a file where I've already posed the actor to match the markers. And you'll see here. Now you can see the sort of darker blue lines inside the actor are called the actor skeleton. They were in the last file I had open. They were just hidden. You can show or hide the various parts of the actor. But the skeleton's a nice thing to show sometimes because it gives you a sort of a simpler representation of how the actor is sectioned off, so that it matches up. But you can see here that the markers don't match up exactly to the actor. I mean, it's pretty close. It's closer than it was when I started, but it's not exact. But you'll see that it's close enough, and that's really all we need to get to here. So the next thing I'm going to do is create what's called a marker set. So I'm going to go down here to my Navigator and find my actor. And in my actor settings here, I'm going to create what's called an empty marker set. And what that's going to do is it's going to give me the positions, the slots on the actor here that I can then associate with the various markers that I have here. So I'm going to click the marker set button and click create. And you're going to see down here in my actor settings that just opened up a bunch of these circles, and they all have the number 0 in them now because I haven't assigned any of the markers to the parts of the actor yet. Depending on the suit that you're wearing, there's often more than one sensor for each part of the body, and so oftentimes you're going to be assigning more than one marker to each of these slots here. So the first thing I'm going to do is undock the Navigator window here so that I can make it a little bit bigger for you to see. And I don't want to do that. There we go. Make it a little bit bigger for you to see. Good. And make it a little bit clear about what I'm doing when I'm dragging this down here. So I'm going to hide the skeleton real quick because I want to make this a little bit clearer for you. Okay. And I'm going to start with the hip sensors. So in this case, they're in the case of this particular motion capture suit. There are 4 markers for the hips. I'm just going to select each of those, and you can see that as I select them, hopefully you can see. That the name of the sensor, of the marker, is over here. In this case, there is hips 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, I basically have to drag these down into the open slot. The MotionBuilder has a nice feature where it allows you to choose what's called the interaction mode. So if you're used to working with 3ds Max, you could set the mouse and keyboard features to be in line with 3ds Max. I work with both, but I prefer Maya, so I usually set my interaction mode for Maya. But when you do that, if I were working with MotionBuilder, the MotionBuilder interaction mode, I could simply drag these markers down. But because I'm working with Maya, I have to hold down the X button when I do this. So I'm just going to drag these, holding down the X key on my keyboard, drag those in here. And you can see now that, or hopefully you can see, that the number 0 for the hip slot has been replaced with a 4 because there are 4 sensors here. And you can see that the hips of my actor are associated with the four sensors, the 4 markers here. And I would basically go through the entire markers, the entire character, and do this. So for the chest, for instance, there's 3 markers. So I would sorry, I got a little mouse delay here. There we go. And I'll X drag those into the chest slot. Missed. Okay. And again, you can see that the 3 chest sensors are lined up with the 3 chest slots on my actor, and I would go through the same thing. Now, there's a couple of important things to note. The shoulders and the hips, or the upper legs, are often empty on the actor slots, because your shoulders and the upper legs, the position of those sensors is determined by the pelvis in the case of the upper legs and the chest in the case of the shoulders. So the position of those doesn't really need to be recorded from the sensors. So we usually drag, in this case I'll take the 3 sensors for the upper arm, and drag them not down to the shoulder, but down to the elbow slot, because the elbow there we go. The elbow is the position of the elbow in relation to the position of the chest will determine how the pose of the upper arm will work. Okay, so generally speaking, and again, I've never worked with a motion capture system that doesn't work this way. The upper leg and upper arm sensors are skipped. So I would basically go through the entire marker set and make sure that I have every marker dragged into one of these slots. But just again, to save time here, I'm going to click on the editing layout again to redock my Navigator. But I'm going to open up a file where I've already done this. Okay. And if I find my actor again, you can see that all of the slots here that I'm using have been replaced. The number 0 has been replaced with however many sensors were being used, and each of those match up with the different slots. So I have 4 for the hips, I have 2 for the thighs, 2 for the shin, 3 for the feet, 1 for the toes, and so on. So once I've done this, and I've lined all of these up, out here you'll probably see another few sensors. This was actually a tennis racket. This is the performance here was for or I asked the actor to act out a tennis performance, and so we assigned some extra sensors that came with the system to a tennis racket. I don't have a tennis racket modeled, so I'm going to skip those for now. But once you get all of all the markers dragged into the slots for the actor, you're going to click Snap, and that's going to ask you to recalibrate the markers for either translate and rotate, the position and the rotation, or just rotation only. We're going to do both the translate and the rotation, and this is going to allow us to make up for those discrepancies between where the markers are and the actor that we pose. And this is why I said you didn't have to have it line up exactly with it, because it's going to help you. MotionBuilder is going to help you sort of create those, recalculate that so that they line up perfectly. So I'm going to click T and R, and I'm going to play this for you now, and you're going to see that the actor moves with the markers. So I'm just going to full screen this so you can see a little better. And you see now it's moving exactly as I'd want it to, even though the markers and the actor don't line up perfectly. They line up well enough, and now the actor is moving exactly with the markers. So this is sort of the first part of the battle here. We've gotten the markers to work with the actor, and now we're going to go about setting up the actor to work with the 3D character. So now that I have the actor set up and it's working perfectly with the markers, I'm going to bring in my 3D character. So I'm going to merge this 3D character into the file, and you're going to see that the character that I use, and I think I used this same character for the previous MotionBuilder demo, excuse me, is a vastly different size and proportions than the actor, right? The actor is basically a proportionate male. That was the person that was wearing the suit was a maybe 5'11" tall man, and this character that I'm using, 3D character I'm using, is a small child with an extremely exaggerated head. But you're going to see that even though they're vastly different proportions and dimensions, that we can make them work with one another perfectly. So I'm just going to set the time frame here a little bit shorter because we're make sure we're only playing exactly what we need. But now that I have the character in here, and I showed you guys in the previous MotionBuilder demonstration. If you haven't watched that, you can see it on our YouTube channel. But if I go up to my Tommy character here and my character controls and switch my display to normal, you can see, or X-ray rather, you can see that I have a control rig that I set up, and I showed you how to set up that control rig in the previous demo. So right now, this Tommy character, this baby character, is being controlled by the control rig that I set up for it. So, right now it's got full body IK. It's being controlled by this this control rig character. So all I really need to do to have it be controlled by the actor is change its input or its source from that control rig that I created for it to the actor. So I'm just going to go up into my source. Here are my character controls. And rather than the control rig, I'm just going to choose actor. And again, I'll play this for you. I'm just going to choose Snap on Frames. It's going to help me make sure that when I click on a frame here, that I get on whole frames rather than on in between whole frames. And I'm going to click the loop button so that I can play this back to back. And I'm going to display just the models so we don't see any of the skeleton or control rig. And I'll play this for you, and you'll see now that the character moves perfectly with the actor. Okay? So even though they're vastly different sizes and dimensions and proportions, it moves exactly the way the actor does. And this is really one of the great features of MotionBuilder, is that it really doesn't matter, other than trying to match up a bipedal performance with a quadruped or maybe even a multiped 3D character becomes difficult, because you're talking about a performer that has 2 arms and 2 legs and walks upright, and trying to line up that performance with a quadruped it can be difficult. But for things like something like King Kong, if you remember the King Kong movie from 5 or 6 years ago, the motion capture was all performed by an actor called Andy Serkis. He also did the Gollum character in all of the Lords of the Rings movies, and he was obviously a biped, and he acted out a performance that was often a quadruped performance for King Kong, and they were still able to use that. So in a lot of ways, you're able to with very few exceptions, you're able to get any motion capture performance to work with any 3D character. Okay, so now that we have this working correctly with our character, we're going to do some minor editing here. And some of you may have saw that as I was playing that the performance, that the characters, the baby character, just to full screen again, that the arms go through its body at a number of different times. And again, that's because of the different proportions between the performer and the character. And that's what I want to try to fix really quickly. So in order to do that, right now I can no longer do anything to Tommy. If I were to select any part of the character here and try to move it, nothing would happen, because right now that Tommy character is being controlled by the actor, and so all of its controls are basically locked to the way that actor moves. So in order to go work on the control rig that we had, I need to take the animation that's on the actor and apply it to that control rig. And the way that I do that is by doing something called plotting or baking. And what that's going to do is going to take the animation from the actor, that motion capture animation, and apply it to the control rig. Now, it's important to understand that motion capture data is captured so that for every sensor, there's a keyframe on every frame of animation. So if you have a minute of animation at 30 frames per second, that is 30 frames. There's a keyframe on every one of those frames for every sensor, and that data is far too dense to actually go in and work with, because it's a keyframe on every frame. You couldn't go and edit any of those keyframes without it really changing the performance and giving you a lot of errors. So when I plot or bake this performance from the actor to the control rig, that's going to be the same case. There's going to be a keyframe on every part of the control rig for every frame in the animation. So I'm not going to be able to work with these on a per keyframe basis, but that's okay, because with MotionBuilder we can layer animation, and when we add a new animation layer, we can work with that layer independently from the motion capture layer, but it works additively with that motion capture. So I'm going to go back up to my character controls here, and I'm going to go to the plot or bake menu, and I'm going to plot the animation from the actor, because that's currently the source, to the control rig. It's going to take a minute to calculate, but once it does, you're going to see now that the animation has stayed. I'm going to hide my actor real quick so they don't see it, because we're no longer, now that we've baked the animation or plotted the animation from the actor to the control rig, I no longer need to see the actor. So I'm going to hide all of that actor here. And we'll see now that the source is for the Tommy character, the baby character, is set back to the control rig, and I can now select different parts of the character and move them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, again, if I select any one of these parts of the control rig now, I don't know if you can see this on the screen here, but on the timeline, rather than displaying all of those keyframes, it just gives me a message that says too many keys for edit. And that basically tells me that there's so many keyframes that I really can't edit them. But if I were to shrink the range here, you'll see at some point as I get small enough, all of the keyframes will be displayed. And you can see that just for the one part of the character I have selected, which is the right hand, there's a keyframe on every single frame of animation. That is really an untenable amount of data to work with. So I couldn't take any one of those keyframes and change it and really affect the performance in any measurable way. So I'm just going to drag my range back here so I'm seeing the whole thing. So what I need to do is I need to add an animation layer. And what that's going to allow me to do is work without so many keyframes and work additively with the motion that I already have. So down here on my animation layers menu, there's already a layer here, but it's empty. So I'm going to get rid of it. And I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to call this, I'm going to right click, and again, as you remember this from the last presentation, unlike a lot of what you're used to with Maya or 3ds Max, double clicking on a name in MotionBuilder doesn't allow you to rename it. Double-clicking MotionBuilder selects things. So if you want to rename something, you need to right-click and choose Rename. And I'm going to call this layer Arms Adjust, because I'm going, nice if I spelled it correctly, because I'm going to use this layer to, adjust the position of the arms so that they no longer penetrate the body as he swings. So right now I'm going to be working on that layer. That's the active layer. There are no keyframes on here yet. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of my animation, and the first thing I'm going to do is at the very beginning, before he starts to move here, so where he drops his arms to the side, right about there is where they start to go through the body here. And if I get in close enough, you can see this. Sorry for the lag time here, but you can see that the arms are going through the body here. So that's about the first frame where I want to start adding my adjustment keyframe. So I'm going to go back to this point where he's still in the T stance here, and I'm going to add what's called a 0 keyframe. And what that's going to do, by adding a 0 keyframe, I'm basically telling the animation to keep what's on the motion capture layer at this frame, and then moving forward, as I set keyframes, those are going to be added to that animation. So I'm going to click 0, and you're going to see I'll click a keyframe. I'm going to do this for both arms here. I'm going to do that at the same time, and I want to work with the character, because I just want to make these changes to the arm, not the whole character. So rather than full body mode, I'm going to work in body part mode here. And I'm going to set those 0 frames at the frame 271. And then I think I discovered at frame 290 is where the arms really start to go through the body for the first time. Okay, so at frame 290, I'm going to take the arm here and rotate it so that it's not penetrating the body. Looks good. Same thing for the other arm. Rotate it out a bit. I may rotate it, and again we can work with 2 modes, global rotation or local rotation. So I'm going to rotate it a little bit out too, so that the pose looks a little bit more natural. Same thing with the other arm. That looks pretty good. So select both arms again and set a keyframe there. Okay? So what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to keep the animation here, but from this point on the arms are going to be out a little bit farther, and you can see that they're not penetrating the body any longer, at least for the time being. And as I move forward in the animation, we're going to sort of find each of the areas where I'm getting those penetration. You can see right here the arm swings right through the head. Okay, so what I want to do is find sort of the last spot before it kind of starts to do that. And set a keyframe. In this case, I'm going to set it just for the right arm, because that's the only arm that's going to be penetrating as he swings here. And I'll set a keyframe at the frame where I think it looks good. Right, so it's not penetrating the body. And as I go forward here, go to the frame where it really goes through the head. So right about there. And now I'm going to make my adjustment so that it no longer goes through the head. Okay? How does that look? Pretty close. That looks good. And set another keyframe. And we can see now that the arm doesn't go through the head as he swings here. All right? I'm going to go through it again, find the next spot. There we go, another. So again, I'll find the frame where I think it looks good before the arm starts going through the body again. Right about there. Set a keyframe. Move forward. Where it's really through the body. And adjust the position of the arm a bit. That looks good. Set another keyframe. Scroll through. Looks pretty good. Go forward. Find the next time. Looks like another one. That looks good. So keyframe at that frame. Move forward to where it's really penetrating the body the worst. There we go. Keyframe. Looks like it's going through the head again there. Go, set a keyframe. Move forward. Adjust. And set another keyframe. Okay, so you get the basic idea. And this is really what motion capture editing is all about. This is the lion's share of my personal, the work I do for my freelance business at this point. And it's a pretty time-consuming, often time-consuming process, fairly tedious. I think there's a couple awkward positions of the arm there. So set a keyframe. So adjust that. I'm just going to lock the hand real quick so I can keep that, move the elbow without changing the position of the hand. Looks good. Set a keyframe. Okay. Good. Okay, and that's essentially the process that you go through. So assuming I went through the entire performance and fixed all of the issues that I wanted to, I would be ready to now send this back to whatever software I use to model and skin the character. In this case, it was Maya. And just like we plotted the animation a couple of minutes ago from the actor to the control rig, in order to get this animation back into your native 3D software, Maya, Studio Max probably, you need to plot the animation from the control rig to the skeleton, because the control rig only exists in MotionBuilder. So if I were to try to export this animation back to Maya at this point, I wouldn't get any of the animation, because right now all of that animation is on the control rig, and that control rig is only exists in MotionBuilder. So I would go to the same menu and the same plot menu, and instead of choosing the control rig this time, now I can send it back to the skeleton. And I'll go through and process. And now you see that there is no longer any control rig for the Tommy character. There's just the skeleton. And if I were to select any joint in that skeleton, you can see here that if I scroll this down a little bit so I can see more of a smaller section of my timeline, you'll see that by plotting the animation from the control rig to the skeleton, I've again created a keyframe on every frame of animation for every joint in the skeleton. And so once you're ready to send this back to your native 3D software, you have to make sure that you're ready to go, that you've done all the editing, that you're happy with the performance, because once you plot the data to the skeleton, that's it. It's on the skeleton. You can't transfer it back to the control rig or to the actor, and that you're ready to go. So this is really the last step in the process before you're going back to your native software. And I'm just going to sort of play this out as we end here, and just hopefully you got a lot out of it. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. My email is kmcallahan, so KMCALLAHAN @aii.edu, and feel free to email me if you have any questions about this. And hopefully it just gave you a little indication of what MotionBuilder is. Despite what you might think about it, it isn't the most creative process in the world. Designing the performance, modeling the character, those are creative endeavors. Animating, doing keyframe animation is certainly creative. But the motion capture performance itself and editing that motion capture data is fairly tedious, and it's very technical. So I think we have a lot of students that really think that motion capture is really cool, and it is. There's no question. It's great technology and it works incredibly well. But if you have a desire to be a motion capture artist, you need to really understand that it's a largely technical endeavor. Most of the work that I do is motion capture, the editing at this point, where I'll go on the set and supervise the motion capture performance, and then work on editing the animation, applying it to the 3D character. That's pretty tedious work, and it's not terribly creative. So it's important to know what motion capture is and what it isn't, and hopefully I at least gave you that much information. Okay, so I really thank you for attending, and I hope you got something out of this. Bye-bye.